Okay, guys, 6.7, it says probability and odds. And those two things are really different ways of writing one thing. And I'll explain that to you in just a moment. Okay? But there's a branch of mathematics called probability where math really kind of predicts what's going to happen. Okay? Given the certain possible outcomes and given the outcomes that we want. Okay? Now, a couple of things that we need to know. First thing that we're going to go over, and you've got it right on the sheet in front of you, so you should be looking at it while I'm talking about it too. But right at the top here is a little formula. And you're going to use that from now until you graduate high school. And maybe more if you do a probability and statistics class in college. Okay? Or biology, or other things like that. You may be using this kind of stuff. Anyway, it says probability. Probability is equal to the number of outcomes that are desired divided by or over the number of possible outcomes. So think about a coin. And I said, what's the probability that it's going to land on heads? Well, let me ask you something. How many possible outcomes are there? Ethan, if I flip a coin, how many possible outcomes are there? There are two. It's heads or tails, right? So the possible outcomes goes on the bottom, 2. But how many of those outcomes do I want? Trigo? Well, I want one. I want the heads part, right? Because that means that I win your money. Okay, good. All right, so the probability of it landing on heads is 1 out of 2. Okay? So if I have a number cube or a die, you know, if you have 2 of them, they're called dice. But if you have 1 of them, you call it's just a die. Okay? So I throw a die, or I cast it. It's what it's called. Casting a die. So I cast the die. What are the chances what's the probability that I'm going to throw an even number? An even number. Okay? Simon, what do you think?
1/2.
Well, wait a minute. Yes, but before we get to 1/2, three of those numbers, 3 out of the 6 numbers are even numbers, right? 2, 4, and 6. Okay? And those are the ones that I want. But there are 6 possible numbers. So the probability of me throwing an even number is 3 out of 6. But just like Simon said, I don't want to leave it like this. Probability is also a ratio, so I want to reduce it. And I get 1 over 2. Okay? Now, oh, wait. That was the actual example? I had no idea that I did the example. I just made that up. Nikki, am I right? I wasn't looking at the board, was I? That just happened. What's the probability of that happening? I don't even want to go there. Okay? Now, there are a couple of other things. We just did example 1, but there are a couple of things that I want us to, some terms that I want in our heads. Guys, theoretical probability is what I just did with the number cube. Did I actually throw a number cube 20 times to see how many times I got even numbers? No. That is called experimental probability, when I actually did it. Right? That's an experiment. Experimental probability is the probability based on repeated trials. If I did it over and over and over again, the number of times I got what I want over the number of times I did it. Okay? Theoretical is when I just use the model itself. It's based on possible outcomes desired outcomes divided by possible outcomes. Okay? Now, odds, we've talked about probability. Odds is the number of desired outcomes to the number of undesired outcomes. Okay? Now, odds for whatever reason are generally written with a colon, not like a fraction. Probability is generally written as a fraction or a decimal, whereas odds is written with a colon. But they're all ratios, right? So let me ask you this. Let's use this example. This first one, it says, what's the probability that you roll an even number? Well, let me ask you this. What are the odds that you throw an even number? Now remember, odds says the number of desired outcomes to the number of undesired outcomes. Well, how many of the outcomes are desired, Liam?
1 to 1.
No. How many of the outcomes are desired? 3. Okay. Now, Liam, how many of the outcomes are not desired? Do we not want? 3. Okay. But since this is a ratio, it's written a little differently than we're used to seeing it. It's written with the colon. But since it is a ratio, what do I need to do with this? I need to reduce it just like I would a fraction. And 3 goes into both of them.